Hello kitchen crew, thank you very much for being on tonight. I am so looking forward to showing you how to make tortillas because I get so many queries and questions about tortillas. Forgive me. As we get started, let me know who's online. I want to know who's cooking with you in the kitchen today. Whether you are cooking live or watching this as recording, I would still love for you to interact and let us know how it's going in the kitchen. And obviously, if you have any questions, think about them and let me know while I'm on here if you are live. And if you aren't, then I can get onto them after. So please still continue to interact with that. Okay, so tortillas tonight. One of my favorite topics is because, like I said before, I get so many questions about tortillas, about wraps. How do we get healthier wraps into lunch boxes? How do we, have less bread so then we want to have wraps? Now, I know that they are a major go-to for a lot of families, and I just wanted to, show you some of the differences between some of the conventional wraps that we can buy in the shops and what I'm trying to teach you now and how easy it is to make your own gluten-free wraps at home. So just as an example, and it's totally not just this brand. There's many brands that do this, but in this case, what I want to show you here is a little bit of the detail. So I want you to have a look at these wraps and see how much, I guess you can tell that they're in pretty good condition, but I guess there's no sign of discoloration, nothing like that. They're still nice and soft and pliable. I think it's really quite amazing actually when you know the rest of the story. So these wraps, they're not something I bought. They're something that I ended up pulling out of someone's pantry when we were doing a pantry and kitchen flip at their house. And they were at the very back of the pantry, buried behind a lot of stuff. And when I pulled them out, I said to the lady, I don't know if those were meant to be back there, as in they've probably been forgotten about. How long do you think those have been there? And she thought that they were approximately 6 to 8 months old by that point. Now, when I did this, was already nearly a year and a half ago. So these wraps have been at least, as far as my knowledge is, about 2 years. Unfortunately, the best before date has rubbed off, so I'm not able to tell what it says. It just looks like there's maybe remnants of a 2016, maybe on there somewhere. But moral of the story is, this brand or not, generally speaking, to be a manufactured good like that, they need to be putting in these non-foods, or they choose to be putting in these non-foods, so that their product lasts longer. And I don't know about you, but I would rather, if my body was eating something, that a bacteria was happy to at least eat. Now I know they're in a sealed package and things, but generally speaking, it's pretty hard to exclude those types of bacteria, even from the packaging on the inside. And most things should go off. So my point here is, I would love to help you learn how to eat real food and see how easy it is to make. And particularly with tortillas, tonight we are going to take longer because I want to show you all the skills and all the ideas so that you can make them faster and faster every time from here on. Okay, so tonight they're going to take longer, but I promise you the more time and the more times you make these, the more practice you get, the faster you will be at making tortillas and the yummier they'll get. And the more creative you can get, and you can turn them green by putting spinach in them, or you could turn them red by putting roasted capsicum in them, or smoked paprika and that kind of thing. So the world gets really exciting when it comes to wraps. And I'd like to pass that excitement on to you because they are a very nice staple to have on hand and very easy to have in the freezer for those last minute moments when you feel like a wrap. Okay, so let's get into it. That being said, because we're going to prepare a whole dinner out of this tonight, I wanted to be able to show you some other types of fillings that we can put in a wrap. And I know that the sky is the limit when it comes to fillings in a wrap. So tonight I had to make a decision and had to choose. So I've chosen to make a white bean hummus, and then we're going to saute up a bunch of different vegetables. The reason why I chose this is because it's literally a quick and easy go-to that I do very regularly in the kitchen, especially on those evenings when I go to the fridge and I go, oh, there's nothing in there to eat. There's generally something I can scrounge together veggie-wise, bits and bobs here and there, throw it in the frying pan, saute it up nice and lightly. We don't want to overcook it. And then we'll whip together a bean hummus, some type of bean. Doesn't have to be chickpeas, it can be white beans, it can be kidney beans. If you've got black beans, you can give that a go. So we're going to pull together a nice creamy dip to go with them inside the wrap. And this is just, like I said, one of many versions. Tonight, maybe you're doing something different. So I'd love to hear from you. What are you doing in your wrap tonight? There's lots of variations. We're going to start with the white bean hummus because that's going to work in with our timing in order to get the wraps done and keep them nice and warm and fresh. And then same with the sauteed veg. I want that to be nice and fresh on the plate. So one other thing that you'll be learning in the process and in the flow of these cook with me's is a little bit of timing, meal timing. And it's very important. For example, you know, if we're making pasta and sauce, that the pasta is not ice cold by the time we go to eat the meal. So timing is another important thing that you'll pick up on as you do more and more of these cook with me sessions. All right, let's get into it. I'd like to hear from you as well. Who's ever had, okay, first of all, who loves hummus? Second of all, if you love it, do you make it or do you buy it? I did see just the other day in a fridge that, you know, someone's buying it in bulk. They're now making big buckets of hummus, but they're not making it yet. And I just want to show you how easy it is. Whether you're using chickpeas or white beans, completely up to you. Lots of different variations. Okay, so if you haven't already got out the ingredients for that, we're going to need some white beans or kidney beans, chickpeas, whatever you're using, some tahini, some lemon, garlic, salt. What am I forgetting? You remind me. Olive oil and a little bit of cumin. Okay, this is such a basic recipe. And the more you can do this and the more you can remember this, making it over and over, you'll see that I'm not even going to measure tonight. So you're going to have to look at your recipe for the exact measurements if you're not sure, or you can watch me and see how easy it is to kind of go by feel when it comes to a dip. The moral of this story and everything that I'm trying to achieve through Cook With Me for you is so that you can get into the kitchen and not need a recipe. It is the least form of stress you can have in the kitchen, is to just be able to rock up and pull something together without having to look at the recipe. We're just going to use them for inspiration. Okay, so come with me. Let's get the white bean hummus happening. Okay, couple of things here. I'm going to use a tin of white beans tonight, organic white beans, because for most of you, this is going to be something you want to be able to pull together in a quick instant, and you might not be so organized as to have your own soaked, cooked beans in the freezer ready to go. So in this case, I'm going to be using the tinned beans, but I am going to say that normally, and my preference is to have pre-soaked your own beans so that we can help reduce the phytic acid content of them, cook them, and then freeze them into portions so that you can just as easily grab them from the freezer instead of grabbing them from a tin. Especially if you have any digestive challenges or digestive difficulties, that is an extra step that will make a big difference for most people's bellies. If you tend not to tolerate things like chickpeas or beans, it's possible that you're just not tolerating them from a tin, but that you would tolerate them if they've been pre-soaked, cooked by yourself, and then frozen for another day. Okay, so with the tin, we're going to need to go over and rinse that while you get all your other ingredients out, and then we're going to juice our lemons. So bear with me while I go and rinse this one. If you were using chickpeas, maybe save the juice that comes out of the chickpea tin. It's called aquafaba, and we can make mayonnaise or aioli from that. So maybe save that. It should last maybe 2 to 3 days in the fridge that you can still make mayonnaise with it. But that's another option. And I'm also going to show you one day how to make meringue out of that same chickpea juice, believe it or not. That's coming up. Now, the other thing I want to say just quickly is have a little think about whether or not you want to double this recipe. So if you happen to have the 2 tins of cannellini beans and you have some extra lemon juice and enough ingredients to double it, do you and will you be able to make use of that dip for the next sort of 4 to 5 days? I have a lot of dips in the fridge at the moment, so I don't need to double the recipe, so I'm just going to keep it single. But this is part of, again, the skills that you're picking up over time, is anywhere possible, if you can make a double batch, it'll save you a lot more time than having to make 2 batches throughout the week at separate times. All right, so now we've got our rinsed white beans. Does anyone have any questions so far? How's everyone going? We'll do a quick hello to everyone so far that's on. Hello, Kelly, Jenny, thank you for joining us. Jan's on with us, another Kelly. Georgie, thank you. Lorraine, Monique's on. Thanks, guys. Oh, so excited to be cooking with you and knowing, I guess, most of you, I know who else is getting to benefit from this meal tonight. So, well, likely benefiting from this meal tonight. So thank you. All right, now let's just come over here and I'm gonna grab all my recipe gear for you. Okay, so food processor or blender. If you like it really, really creamy, fluffy, and smooth, we want to go the blender. But I'm going to be doing it in the Thermomix tonight because I've got that here. Okay, so beans in and all other ingredients in. There's nothing complicated about this dip. It is one of my favorite recipes, simply because it is that easy. Juice. So we'll need a lemon squeezer and your lemon juicer, if you will. Nice, fresh, juicy lemons at the moment. Loving them. Thank you, Freshbox. All right. Okay, so lemon. If you don't have lemon, you can use lime. I'd like to know what kind of beans you're using. Tonight you're possibly following the recipe, but if you're not, I want to know how you're getting creative. Let's get some lemon juice in there. I love it extra lemony, so up to you. You can follow the recipe as is, and you can leave some aside. Like I said, I love it quite lemony, so I'm going to put that whole half a lemon in. It's quite a juicy one. And then let's jump forward. We're going to need some cumin. Now, you don't have to put cumin in. You can put any other form of spice or seasoning that you like. You can get creative in that respect. If you're going to make a traditional hummus, that calls for cumin and or a little bit of coriander, but that's entirely up to you. So roughly, if you love it, half a teaspoon. If not, put a quarter of a teaspoon, or you can go by taste and adjust after. A little bit of salt. When you're using a salt shaker like this, it might feel like you're putting a lot in because you're used to using this over your single meal. But keep in mind that this is potentially going to be 6 to 8 servings of hummus. So it does feel like a lot, but you're all good. Okay, olive oil. Now, if you are already starting to get organized in the kitchen, in the fridge as well, and you've got some cold pressed flax oil, please get that out now, and this is your opportunity to sneak some of that in for your omega-3s. So this is something that I like to get in the habit of doing, is in addition to the healthy olive oils, I want to increase the omega-3 content. So you can put in probably a good 2 teaspoons at least of the flaxseed oil. Unless you absolutely love the flavor, then you could replace more of the olive oil with that as well. So that's up to you. Now, garlic, another very flying garlic. Another very typical flavor in a hummus. The one thing I will say about garlic is if you love it, then I would recommend probably going to the extra little step, and again, this is maybe just an organization thing that you could have done last night while the oven was on, for example, is try to always keep some roasted garlic in the fridge. So well-roasted garlic, it turns into a puree. Store it in the fridge in a little tiny container with a little layer of olive oil on top, and then that'll last in the fridge as a roasted garlic puree. So if you had roasted garlic puree, you could put probably 3 cloves worth into this dip and it would be divine. But because this is raw, I'm just going to put in half and see how we go. Keeping in mind that garlic is very good for you, but your neighbors might not love it. And also it's going to get stronger as it sits. So when you first go to taste this, keep in mind that even if you can't quite taste enough garlic yet, you may be getting enough of it by tomorrow. So garlic is one of those ones that increases as it sits. Same with ginger, same with onion to some extent. So I'm just going to put in about half of this clove and call that good, just in case. If anyone has had the cold or the flu, or your family has, put the whole clove in, just do it. Have a lot of garlic. All right, where are we up to? We've got our salt, we've got our olive oil, we've got our lemon, we've got our cumin, we need the tahini. Now, as you can see, I love my tahini. Now, I've called for a quarter of a cup of tahini. If you're using unhulled tahini, that's going to be quite a bit stronger in flavor. So if you're buying unhulled, you may already know this, so you can adjust accordingly. But if you're using unhulled, it's got more nutrition, but it's also got a much stronger flavor. So up to you, you may want to put less. I've designed that, I guess, for the hulled form of tahini, and I love sesame. Okay, so I'm going to put the full quarter of a cup. You could maybe start out with half as much and then adjust after when you get a chance to taste it. So there's yummy half a cup, or a quarter of a cup, sorry. Get all of that in there. Okay, so we're just blending it up as smooth as you like the texture. And depending on your machine, we might need to give it a little help and push it down again. Okay, so this is where a nice spatula comes in handy. Let's push that one down, give it another blend. And then we'll have a taste and adjust. Okay, and this is another skill that we get to develop in the sense of it being a real-time cooking program, is that you can learn how to adjust if the recipe is not to your liking. I think that's a really powerful skill to have in life, because it's often that, you know, you'll follow a recipe perfectly, or you think you'll follow it perfectly. Sometimes the recipe is completely off, and sometimes your taste buds just don't agree with what the recipe's called for. So then what? Then you've got this dish where you've got no idea what to do with it, how to fix it, how to adjust it. Okay, so that's something that I'd like to help you build this skill with as we go. So have a taste of that. Has it got enough lemon? Is it salty enough? Are you getting enough of the cumin flavors for your liking? Do you want it to have a little bit of heat? Should we put a bit of cayenne pepper or chili pepper in there? Does it need anything? Okay, so have a think about that. I'm pretty happy with this one. It's got a nice amount of lemon to it. I'd say it could probably use a touch more salt, but again, that's just my palate. So when it comes to texture and consistency, this is just going to come down to how patient you are with your machine. I find that if I don't get enough volume into this machine, it doesn't love blending it really smoothly. So this machine actually benefits from having a double batch at all times. So if you're not doing that, it just involves a little bit more patience to kind of scrape it down, blend it up a few more times. Otherwise, you can do it in a blender and get a very creamy, fluffy dip. Okay. Now, one other way, just so you can have maximum customization when it comes to this type of recipe, if you wanted to put some roast vegetables through here and to kind of round out or make the dip go further and not just be bean, that's another option too. So if you happen to have roasted capsicum or roasted carrot, roasted sweet potato, roasted pumpkin, anything like that that happens to already be done and cold in the fridge, you can blend that in as well. Okay, let's transfer this into a bowl because we're going to need our food processor again to make our dough for the tortillas. So let's transfer that out and get ready for our tortillas. If you haven't already got all the ingredients out for those tortillas, please, you can work on that whenever you're done with this. And regarding the tortillas, I'm going to talk to you about some different options that you have with them as well. Now, you may have noticed in the photo of the tortillas that it doesn't look like it's a super, super soft wrap. Okay, so I want to talk about that because there's ways that we can make it a super soft wrap, really pliable. But the nice thing is you get the choice. You get the best of both worlds. Whereas with a purchased wrap, you kind of get what you get. So when we make these wraps, you're going to have the option to either cook them at higher heat for a shorter amount of time, which will yield a slightly softer wrap. But if you want it to be more of a crispy wrap, then we're going to cook it at lower heat for a longer period of time. And then there's tricks afterwards. So if you're wanting to eat these wraps the next day and you'd like them to be nice and soft and wrappable, then you would wrap them in either, well, don't love it, but using a plastic bag to keep all the air out and really squishing all the air out of them. And I'll show you too, when we take them out of the pan, there's a way to stack them on a plate, cover them with a damp tea towel, and that'll help the steam and the heat from them to soften them as they sit before we eat them. Okay, now because we're just making the tortillas out of this, the little bit of residue in the bottom should be fine if you've done a pretty good job with your spatula at cleaning it out. So I'm gonna call that good. And I'm not going to bother washing it because then I've got to dry it, and that's one more step. So trying to save you steps. If you have a good spatula, use it for what it's worth. Then you prevent waste. You could even go in there and get the little bits that are hiding under the blade if you want an extra little yummy. And then we're gonna make our tortillas straight in there. Okay, so quick little cleanup as we go. Another good habit to develop. And I will come right back here so that we can blend up our tortillas. Okay. Where is everybody at? How are we going? Everyone caught up? Ready to make tortillas? You will also need a clear bench space so that we can roll them out once we've made the dough as well, but we'll get to that. Okay, now, I'm gonna come with me this way. I'm gonna put the hummus over here, give my fingers a little wash, and we will prepare to make tortillas. So we're gonna need the measuring cups. Come back this way and let's get into it here. Okay, make ourselves some space. Now, wherever possible, whenever you're using flour, it's so much more accurate if you can go by weight rather than volume measurement. So I've given you both in the recipe, but if you have any form of kitchen scale that's reliable, please do use that to weigh out the tortilla flours. Especially for your first time making these, it will ensure a lot more success. The difference between, if we were to scoop the flour into this cup really lightly and then level it off and weigh it, it'd be around 120 to 130 grams. But if we were to go in there and scoop around the edges and give it a little pack or a little tap as we level it out, it could go up to as much as 165 to 170 grams, which is going to make a massive difference in most baked goods. So wherever possible, whenever you're measuring flour, try to go by weight. So in this case, I'm going to turn the weight on here. If you've got a kitchen scale, you can get that one out now. And I'm going to use buckwheat flour, but you can use sorghum flour or rice flour here in this case. Buckwheat flour will yield a slightly softer tortilla than rice flour or sorghum. That's why I've chosen it. Okay, so 200 grams of buckwheat flour. So much easier to go by weight too. You don't have to sit there and scoop everything carefully and just dump it in. 195. That'll call that good. All right, and same with your tapioca flour or your potato starch. Whichever one you want to use, in that case, they are interchangeable. Let's get another tare on that and 200 more grams of the tapioca. You may notice that the tapioca is much more dense than the buckwheat flour, so it actually takes less volume to get up to our 200 grams. It's very powdery and puffy though, so, oh, there we go. That wasn't intentional. Okay, 210, that's all right. We'll work with that. Now, next up, I've also given you options between using psyllium husk and xanthan gum. There is technically a third option that we can use flax meal, but I'm not going to complicate it on you tonight. And the good news is that I've taste tested it amongst people and we can't tell the difference between the ones that we use. So hopefully on hand, you've either got some xanthan gum. I can't say that guar gum works as well, unfortunately. In some recipes, it's equal, but in this case with tortillas, because we're getting them so thin, unfortunately, I haven't had the results with guar gum. If that's all you've got tonight, and then go for it, and please let me know how it goes. But if not, and you've got some flax meal that you can grind up, that might be something you could use instead. Now, psyllium husk. One of my favorite magic broom fibers, and those of you have probably heard me speak about this already in my smooth move mixture. So I've just taken regular psyllium husk and I've put it through the coffee grinder so that I end up with a powder like this. And it just is going to make sure that the wraps can be more evenly smooth and hold together a bit better if we've ground it as a powder. So not 100% critical, but these are the little tips and tricks you pick up along the way to make this a better result. And especially when we're working with gluten-free flours. Did you know that gluten is Latin for the word glue? That's how they came up with the name, is because they realized that that property in wheat was very advantageous to making things like, you know, bread rise and croissants. So they loved the fact that it had that element of glue to it, but unfortunately our guts generally don't love that. So if we're using gluten-free flours, we need to make a combination of them so that we can make up all the different properties and get as close as we can to the behavior of a gluten-based flour. The psyllium husk is, in this case, kind of acting like the gluten. It's kind of our binder. And it's also going to help to keep the wraps moist as well. Okay, so just making sure I don't send you on the wrong direction. We're going to need 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of baking powder, not baking soda. Can I please repeat? We need baking powder, not baking soda. They are different. Baking soda is also called bicarb soda in Australia. So I'm not talking about that one. I need baking powder for this recipe. Okay, so 1 teaspoon of each of those. Let's get those in now. And you know, you've seen me be fairly relaxed about a lot of my measurements, but when it comes to baking, I like to be fairly exact because then you know what you're getting. So the back of a knife is a good way to get your level out. So we're going to use the 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and same thing with the salt. 1 teaspoon of salt. So all the dry ingredients into the food processor, then we're going to blend all that up before we put any of the oil in. Okay, so there's 3 blends. First of all, we need to do the dry ingredients only. Hopefully you haven't already added the water and things like that. Okay, so dry ingredients blended. Here we go. Now we need to put in the fat, or the oil in this case. Okay, so we're going to use the 1/4 cup of coconut oil. If you haven't got coconut oil, you could technically use butter. If you're having dairy, you could technically use ghee, but coconut oil is probably my favorite. So we're going to use that full 1/4 cup there. That's pretty close. Okay. So when we get this in there, we're going to look for a crumbled texture. So once we get the oil in, we're going to blend it up again, and we're looking for it to just be evenly distributed throughout the flour. So only a couple more seconds. If you peek in, or if your machine allows you to see, you can, I'll just show you here in a sec. So you can see how it's starting to bind. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, we want that kind of crumbled texture with the fat incorporating into the flour. And then the last step is the water. Now I've said approximately 1 cup and 1/3. And the reason why I've said approximately is because if we've measured our flours differently, or we're using different flours, then you might need to adjust it, and it might surprise you how much you could adjust it. What I do want to say is you're better off ending up with a wetter dough than a drier dough, because it's easier to dry it out than it is to keep it, to add extra moisture in after. All right. Now, I believe I've got the 1 1/3 cup here, just double checking my measure. Yes, 1 1/3 cups. Okay, so let's pour most of that in, if not all of it, and see how we go. We're looking for a dough ball to form, and hopefully it'll cooperate. Okay, this is now an example. Sorry, forgive the time delay here. Okay, so see how we still have some stuff around the edges that we have to incorporate? Okay, and it is, this texture that we've got here is a little bit too hard. So I'm gonna add the rest of the water as per the measurement, and we're gonna go again. Okay, that's a little bit too firm. We want the dough to be a little bit softer than that. All right. So let's push down the edges, make sure we can Get all of that incorporated. And add some more water. You may even need more than the 1 1/3 cup. Okay. I think I am going to, so bear with me. I'm going to grab just a touch more. There we go. So let's start small. We could add more if we have to. Good. Okay, we've got the dough ball forming. Again, once you do this a couple of times, you'll know exactly how much water you're going to need for the flours that you're using. Okay, now this is quite a wet one, but that's okay because as this sits, not only is the psyllium husk going to grab all that extra moisture, but we also then can work with adding a little bit of extra flour onto our working surface. And like I said, it's much easier to work with a wetter dough initially than too dry of a dough. Plus, it's going to give you a nice softer wrap as well. Okay, now we have to set ourselves up with some baking paper, a rolling pin if you have it. If you haven't got a rolling pin, you can always use a wine bottle that's covered in plastic wrap. Done that before. And yeah, hopefully you've got those little bits and pieces. So let's grab that. We're going to bring this over to our rolling surface along with our flour so that we can dry it out as needed. Okay. And we'll grab our baking paper and the rolling pin. Now I'm going to do this straight onto the bench top with the paper. And if your bench top is really slippery and they're sliding around a lot, a couple things you can do. One is to put a moistened towel underneath, and the other one is just to actually sprinkle a little bit of moisture water onto the surface of the countertop where you're working. So I'm going to do that. Basically, it's like wetting that, and then that won't go anywhere. Okay. Now the rest of the time we work with gluten-free flours. This is easy, I promise, okay? I just want you to see how easy it is with these couple little tricks I'm going to give you. So one is the baking paper. And ideally you've got a silicone-based baking paper as opposed to a wax paper that has a fair few chemicals in it, okay? So let's just put a generous amount of flour onto here, especially if your dough is looking quite wet, okay? And then we're going to transfer that dough onto here. And ideally, this will be easier to work with if we can let it sit for a little bit. So like I said, the psyllium husk can do its job absorbing that extra amount of liquid. And it just becomes a little bit more cohesive if we can let it sit. So use that little bit of extra effort to get all the dough out of your machine. Wouldn't want any extra bites of tortillas to go to waste. Making use of that spatula. There we go. Okay. We're clean. At least this way, with you kitchen crew that used to make fun of me for spending hours, not quite, making sure there's nothing wasted there. Now I can't hear you making fun of me, so it's all good. Okay, now this is going to be very easy to work with, I promise. We just have to keep things dry, as in our hands and everything we work with. So we can sprinkle some of that flour up onto it, or we can put a little bit like this, not too much. And then you can either get in there straight away with your hands, or we can make use of the paper just to form our initial ball. And you can see straight away that it's becoming a lot more workable. So now let's work in there with our hands, a little bit of flour onto them, okay? Oh, that's a good texture, that's a good consistency of dough. So you want it to be fairly soft, okay, fairly pliable. But we'll just put that all together. And then we need to divide this into however many tortillas you want to make. So we'll try and make some even amounts, even cuts through it. So let's get an even shape, roughly. And this one I think I could turn into probably 8 tortillas. 6 if you want bigger ones. Maybe we'll go 6. Let's do that. So 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, believe it or not, even in the time that it's going to take us to roll these out, they're going to dry out on us. So we do need to wrap them. You can wrap them in another piece of baking paper, or you could put a moist towel, a clean kitchen towel over them. Ideally, we're not pulling out the plastic wrap, but if you have to, you can. Okay, so we've got our little individual tortillas. These are going to be fairly big tortillas, actually. I probably could have gone 8. If you want them to be easier to handle, and if you're finding they're a little bit big, then probably you can divide them into 8, as I've said. Okay, so let's wrap those guys up, keeping one out so we can work with it. We don't have to do anything, put them anywhere special. We're just going to keep the oxygen away from them. All right, now we get to work with this one. Okay, now the key here is to use your flour to keep it dry. Okay, we're going to start off by giving it a little pre-flatten. Just makes the rolling a bit easier. Plop that down. Put a little bit of flour on top. Okay, and then we're going to need another piece of paper on top of that. Okay, then we get the rolling pin. Now, there's a lot of rolling pins that I've seen that don't have this wheeling handle, so you're kind of tending to hold it here and do this. So just to prevent you from doing the #1 mistake that happens so regularly, is people get in there and they go smush. And you get this nice big hole in the middle, and then they realize why it's so hard to roll out. So I want you to gentle, start with a very light pressure, and as you get your shape happening, then we put more and more pressure down, okay? So to counteract that, I'm gonna go the other way. And I'm just doing very light pressure here, just working from the middle and pushing outwards. Okay, and because I did that, look, now I'm getting this little, like, kind of a bean shape happening here. So I'm gonna try and work that out, but it'll save you if you don't do that initially. So just nice and gentle pressure until you get your shape established. I'm gonna have trouble coming back from that one. Okay, now see how the paper is grabbing. See how it's starting to wrinkle? It's kind of sticking there. So what we want to do is we want to loosen that up so everything can start to flatten better for us. This happens to some people, not to everyone. So the trick here when you work with gluten-free flours, because we don't have the gluten, which is gluing everything together, we're going to get a little bit more ripping happening. Okay? So the trick here to peel off this paper is to flatten it back on itself. As soon as you lift, you're going to get ripping, especially on the edges. So flatten it down and pull away from the surface with it flat on itself. I'm not putting any pressure, I'm just enough so I can pull it away. There we go. Okay. Now as you pull away, then we're gonna need to give it a little bit more flour so this doesn't stick on us. Just a little bit. And we go again. So now I'm putting a fair bit more pressure down, working from the middle, pushing outwards, until I get the shape that I'd like or the thinness of a tortilla that I'd like. That's about good. It's the same deal, flatten it back on itself. You can see how much I made my job harder because I did that initial push down. Okay, so that's why I wanted to show you that is, there we go. Okay. Now to release the other side and make our job even easier when we go to put it in the pan, we only need a touch more here just so it doesn't re-stick, just a touch. And then we're gonna flip it over. So give it a little hold and flip. You will get flour everywhere, just be cool with that. And then we do the same thing on this side. Now if it's really pesky and really sticky or your dough's really too moist, okay, one trick is to put some tension in this direction of the paper. And this is getting a little bit tricky, but you should naturally be able to feel this out. So I'm going to put pressure down here with my middle finger, and then I'm going to peel while I pull and keep the tension on the paper. So I'm pulling this way and I'm peeling back that way. Pull and peel. And if it's going to behave for us. Otherwise, you stick to the first method, flatten down and peel back. Okay, and this is purely dependent on the liquid content of our dough. So the drier the dough is, the less you'll have this problem, but the slightly drier your wraps will be. Okay, so it's this kind of trade-off, and I'll let you decide what trade-off you'd like. Do you want workability so that this is really easy and you can punch them out in 2 seconds with a slightly drier result, drier wrap? Or do you want them to be really soft, and therefore we're going to have to use a little bit more patience when it comes to the workability of it? But there we go. Okay, we could get rid of these wrinkles if you wanted. Another quick little sprinkle and a quick little roll should get rid of the wrinkles. There we go. And if you're the type of person that really loves a perfectly round wrap and you can't really do the whole artisan thing, then one trick is to get yourself a large saucepan lid, hopefully with a sharp edge. So something like this with a sharp edge, and then this becomes our tortilla. Hopefully it'll cooperate. There we go. Okay, and then you can peel away these bits and just have your perfectly round tortilla. And these we can actually still roll back into the next tortilla. So it's not like when you were little and your grandmother was teaching you how to roll pies with gluten flour. You could never use this again. It was forbidden in the pie. Well, at least it was for me. So anyway, so this is our perfectly round tortilla now. If you really need that shape, we can get rid of the excess flour, and then we're gonna get ready to put it in the pan, okay? All right, we're gonna do another one of those because I wanna show you them as we go. So in the meantime, let's get our pans heated up, and we'll get ready to get these in the frying pan. So if you want to speed up the process, you could get 2 frying pans going at once, or you can just do it over a period of time and leave them in the waiting line. Okay, so I'm just going to bring it over here and get the frying pan started. I think I'm just going to stick to the one tonight because I've got time. So we want to heat them up thoroughly, but we're not going to fry them on really high heat. So we're just going to initially get the heat into the pan, make sure like the better quality pan you have, or the heavier the bottom is in the pan, the better your tortillas will turn out. So we kind of want to let them heat up over a slightly longer period of time at a lower heat so that we get a more even heat when we throw the tortillas in there. And don't add any oil, don't add anything to that. We're going to fry them dry. It just makes it a lot easier for the process. So I'm going to let that heat up a little bit slowly while we roll out the next tortilla. So I'm just heating that up on medium heat. Now we can reuse the papers, definitely. We just want to make sure there's nothing stuck on the papers, no extra dough. So you can rub those bits off. There we go. Pull out another dough. We might as well incorporate that one in. See, already it's more workable. It's less sticky in my hands, even though I haven't floured that surface. So already that's a good sign. Okay, a bit more flour on there, a bit more flour to work with it here. Flatten it out. If it sticks, we just need a little bit more. If you get dough on your hands like this, one little trick is to put flour on them and rub them together quite strong, and it rubs off all the little bits without having to actually wash your hands and then re-dry them. Okay, so we don't need those little bits, but it's just an easier way to get the extra dough off. Okay. Now, you've done one. Now you're a master. Here we go for the second one. Nice and easy pressure in all directions, okay? So nice and easy, just flattening it down slowly. We're gonna aim for more of a circle this time. As soon as you see the paper start to grab, you're welcome to peel it back straight away and add more flour. Okay, so it's starting to wrinkle and grab there a little bit. So while it's still thick, it's much easier to peel back. Here we go. So already, just because the dough's been sitting that extra couple of minutes, it's easier to work with. There we go. That's quite thin. Okay. Maybe a sprinkle so it doesn't grab on this side, and then we'll flip. And this one, good, it's gonna come off nice and easy. Okay, so there's our second tortilla. Much easier the second time around, even easier the third time around. We're just gonna get rid of that excess flour because that's not gonna cook in as we fry it. Okay, this can go into the waiting line. And I'll do one more before we have a chance to start frying them. Just to catch up here. So you are going to be a pro at this in no time. A little bit of practice, a little bit of patience. I want to know how your dough is going. So can you guys please, I know you probably have doughy, floury hands at the moment, but can you either give me a thumbs up or let me know how it's going? Do you have any questions about how to work with this dough? It should get easier and easier as you go. Okay, I'm gonna grab this extra piece. Nice and gentle. Starting to grab. Flatten it down, pull it back. It's only the edges that tend to grab, if anything will. There we go. Little touch more flour. Flip it over. There we go. So hopefully it's getting a bit quicker and a bit easier for you as well, especially now that the dough has sat. So if you want to make it easier still, or easier for your first one every time you make this, then you can just let the dough sit for a few minutes. Walk away, do something else, prepare your vegetables, prepare the fillings, whatever else you want to do. But that should get really quite nice and easy. Okay. So come on over here. We're gonna get these into the frying pan. This is feeling pretty hot now. So the only risk we run is if it's not quite hot enough, it'll take longer to cook, which will make a drier, crispier wrap. If you like that, that's great. I like to keep a little bit of moisture in them as we go, but I'm gonna show you another way to do that as well. So we're gonna need a plate to put them on. And then you're gonna need a clean tea towel. And we're just going to flick a little bit of water into it. So I'll get you to actually come around. I'll show you what I mean by that. So you're going to need a clean tea towel. And while we're at it, I might just wash my hands because I've got floury fingers at the moment. Hopefully you've got your kitchen set up as well with your hot soapy water already run, ready to be your rinsing water. I'm going to clean up. Okay, now my little trick for this, unless you have a spray bottle or something that you can use, my little trick for this is just to flick water at it a few times and then give it a good scrunch. Flick a bit more. We don't really want to run it under there because we don't want it to be sopping wet. but we want it to have a little bit of moisture in it so when the wraps steam, then they can create a bit of softness through the wrap. Okay, so that's how we dampen a tea towel for that process. Okay, now the pan should be ready to go. Let's test it out. This is where you get a bit brave and you just gotta chuck it in the pan. So we're gonna start with our nice little round one here. If you've loosened up both sides, you could slide it in. Otherwise you can do the transfer. Okay, I like to do the transfer because then I can have more control over that. So just let it drop into the pan. Now, fairly quickly, we should start to see a little bit of rising, a little bit of bubbles. So this is maybe not quite hot enough. I'll just turn it up here for a little bit, and then we're going to monitor it as we go. Okay. So ideally, we're just going to let this sit. This is where you kind of get a roll on. You get a bit of a feel for how much time you have between cooking of the wrap. Meanwhile, we could be rolling another one. But we're just going to stay here so I can show you the progression of how this is all going to come together. Again, hopefully I've got the pan hot enough. As soon as it cooks enough, it's no longer going to fall apart on you. Okay, so that's kind of what we're waiting for so that we can literally grab it and flip it. And that should be fairly straightforward. You might want to use a flipper just to get under the edge. But we just need to make sure it's... See how the edges are starting to lift slightly? That's a sign that we've got the cooking happening. Okay, so they're just lifting off the edge ever so slightly. So at this point, I mean, you can start, until you get to know it, you can start to have a feel. How delicate is your dough still? Okay, if it feels like it's going to fall apart on you, don't lift it. Otherwise, we can give it a little flip. Okay, so it's not quite cooked enough on that underside. Ideally, we want to see a little bit of toasting, a little bit of crisping up on that side. Okay, so we'll let that keep going. And then we're going to take that out. We're going to stack them on the plate. Put that moist tea towel over top of it if you want the softer wraps. If you like them crispy, then just leave it out without the moist towel. All right. Okay, let's go back. We'll finish rolling a couple of wraps because I want to give you guys time to finish your wraps before we actually saute up the veggies. Otherwise, you'll be eating with half-finished wraps. Okay, so by now, practice number 4. Here you go. You should be nice and quick at it. I want to hear if you're improving. Everyone has flour hands. Okay. So a little bit of flour down, flour on top, paper on that, and then we can start to reuse the other papers that we've had prior as well. Pressure in every angle, every direction. As soon as you see it grabbed, pull it back. We could add a touch more flour. Go again. And you may notice a very big difference if you let your dough dry out. So if you haven't covered your dough, then this will get harder as we go, not easier. So we do want to keep those wrapped. Okay, I'm going to flick a bit of flour on there. Flip it over. I feel like I could practically do the Italian pizzeria thing and flip it around my hand. Okay, we're ready to go for the next one. That one should be done. There we go. See, we've got the nice bubbles happening. That's what we want. It's almost like it's forming a pita. So, perfect. There we go. See how the air is wanting to puff it up? That's awesome. That's exactly what we're looking for. So almost like a pita bread. Pretty much your exact traditional tortilla, but we don't have to have the gluten in it. Look at those yummy air pockets. Yum! So this is when it's nice and wrappable. Look at that. Look at that. It holds. It's beautiful. You can roll it. You can wrap it. So in order to keep that, let's cover it with the moist towel. Keep a bit of that moisture in. And I can tell that we've got some burning of the flour happening here. So we need to turn it down now. Okay. Let's flip this one in. Let that cook while we do 2 more little wraps. Don't let me forget about it. You gotta remind me. I'm gonna forget. So we're reusing the papers. All I needed was a total of 4 papers just for the the mode that I got onto there. A couple wraps ahead of myself. Practice makes perfect, and faster. Now, if you were to be doing a little bit of a Sunday food prep, this is something that you could make a double or triple batch of. And what you would do is freeze them freeze them at this stage. So I'd recommend rolling them out and then leaving them layered with the paper in the freezer and freezing them so that you can just pull them out of the freezer and pop them straight in the frying pan. Remember, a bit of tension. Pull that one off. Give it a little. There we go. Okay. Perfect timing. Flip this one. Last one. Here we go. It's like a marathon. Come back. But I need another paper. There I go. Just telling you all we need is 4 papers. Okay, I'm going to do this one without a paper on top. Let's see how we go. Marathon race. I can see the families having competitions now. I can see you guys, dad against daughter. Who can roll out the faster wrap? Okay, freestyling. No paper on top. This could get dangerous. This is where we need to make sure the rolling pin stays dry, as well as the wrap. Whoa. Yep, getting dangerous. We're getting a nice folded effect. There, that's thin enough. I'm gonna call that an artisan wrap. There we go, done with the flour. Ready to flip the next one. Come on back. Beautiful. Look at that. Okay, so let's add that into the mix here. Let's let that steam stay underneath the towel. A little bit of moisture. And next one into the pan. Oh, see, I didn't loosen that one off. Okay, so that one I'll just do in a second. So sometimes if you haven't loosened them off, it just makes it a bit harder to get them out of the pan. So all I'm going to do is try and do that peel back technique into my hand. There we go. Okay. That one didn't want to cooperate with me. Let's try again. So you can see that they start to become a little bit more workable, and you'll start to get more comfortable with how you can operate them, okay? All right, let's make sure we've got this all set. Okay, so while that's happening, now all we have to do is you have to remind me that this is cooking, and what we're gonna do is chop up all of our ingredients that are going to go in the wraps when they're ready to go. All right, so switching modes, let's clear yourself up that area of the bench where you've probably made a flour party mess, like I have. Give it a little wipe down, and then we'll chop up some veg, really quick and easy, super kind of straightforward, nothing complicated about how we're going to do this. It's just so that we can get those wraps into us. One of my favorite ways to have it if I'm having a little bit of a treat, those of you that like Vegemite on toast, and you don't know how I feel about Vegemite yet, some of you do. Instead, you could be having miso paste instead of Vegemite, and at least not getting all that MSG. So you could even have this with Vegemite. So if the kids want to have their Vegemite wraps or their Vegemite on toast, how about you have miso instead? If you're still having butter, you can have butter and miso, go for it. That's a bit of a treat. Another one of my favorites is tahini and honey on them as a bit of a sweeter treat. Or pesto, or hummus, or anything else you can think of. Just love eating them. Okay, cutting board, knife. let's chop some veggies. Let's get them in the pan. Let's get you eating dinner or lunch, however you're doing this. Pull these veggies over. And we should be ready to flip. Looking good. Yes. Okay, so you'll find that you'll just need to adjust the pan temperature. I've got it on 5 out of 9. That's kind of this burner's happy temperature. Your burner might be different. So if you're getting too much charring too quickly, it's too hot. You got to turn it down. So that's how you can kind of monitor that one. All right, let's chop up some veggies. Now I've got a little bit of capsicum left here to use. I've got my scrap bucket out. So we just want strips. We want stir-fry strips because we're going to be putting them into a wrap. So we need them to just be kind of long and skinny so that they're easier to bite into in the wrap. So long skinny strips, whatever you've got capsicum-wise. Now, I don't know about you, but I like to have my stir-fry veg the least cooked that I can get away with. So I like it to be fully heated through, but I still like quite a bit of crunch in it. I like it to not feel totally overdone. So I'm just going to do a very quick stir-fry, very quick saute with this. You might want to go a little bit longer. So I just want strips of our zucchini. And the less we cook it, the more vitamins and more of the precious phytonutrients we can preserve. They don't all disappear with heat, but the ones that do, we want to preserve them as much as possible. So nice strips of mushroom. There we go. Now the corn, not going to be strips, but I want to use some corn in my wrap, so I'm going to saute it with the other veg. So we'll just take that off the cob. Nice and carefully, really trying to avoid the fingers. Everyone has a different way of doing this. I find this makes the least amount of mess because the corn has the furthest to fall, but everyone's different. There we go. And why don't we put some onion in there? Onion gives a good amount of delicious, yummy flavor. Now, while you're doing this last bit, I want you to think about what kind of spices you might want to jazz up the stir fry with. It may not need much because we've probably put, a fair amount of flavor into the dip. But if you're like me, I like it quite zesty, quite spicy. So maybe you've got a curry blend that you want to sprinkle through the veggies. Maybe you've got a Moroccan spice blend, Italian spice. Entirely up to you, but I think it's really quite nice if we can add a little bit of extra spice to it. So have a think about what you might want to do for that. Let's get some nice strips of onion here. Haven't forgotten about my tortilla. There we go. Okay, well cooked. Let's put that under there. Next, now that we've got the extra paper, we can make sure that it's loosened up. So let's peel that one off. Good stuff. And get that into the pan. If you don't want to transfer it to your hands, you can just flop it in, but I find a bit more luck when I go to my hand first. Ready? Let's see how we go. Gotta have fun with dinner. Oh. Gonna want to pull over for me. There we go. Okay, and that's gonna work out pretty perfectly as far as getting ready to saute up these veggies and serve it. So what you could do now, if you're all caught up with the cutting of the veggies, and this is all you want to put in with it, maybe you could be getting up the plates and getting ready to serve this up so it's nice and warm and the tortillas are fresh, and oh my gosh, you can't achieve that with mission wraps. Or any of the other purchased ones. Hopefully this will be saving you a lot of money as well, because the organic wraps like we're making now, organic, gluten-free. I've even seen coconut wraps, and bless them, they're beautiful. But I think they were $9 for 5 wraps. So I don't know about you, but I think that's worth the extra 10 minutes learning how to roll them yourself, maybe putting a few away on a Sunday into the freezer and actually having that happen. From a cost perspective, savings, and also hopefully health and time. Okay, how are we going? Is everyone caught up? I'd like to hear any questions you've got. Now we have a chance to chat while these tortillas are cooking. We're gonna wait for that nice hot frying pan to just saute these at the very end. We've got our hummus made. Maybe there's other things you wanna be putting in. So if you've got some sun-dried tomatoes or some olives, avocado. Oh, I gotta put some avocado in the wrap. That'd be amazing. All right. So that one's nearly ready to flip. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cook the rest of these wraps after, just so that I can get you guys eating a bit faster. Show you how to do the sauteing, but this is good. We've got a bit of a roll on now with these wraps. And like I said before, you can speed this process up by getting 2 frying pans going at once. And then that way you're back and forth and everyone's eating a lot quicker. You could maybe even punch out 2 batches of the tortillas if you've got a teenager helping you, one of the kids or another parent. One person's rolling, the other person's in charge of cooking. These wraps, believe it or not, I've even done camping. So if you can picture, I'm not talking glamping either. I'm talking like picnic table and fire pit with a grill thing on top. So the flat plate grill, we got that all heated up. One of us was rolling, the other person was passing it, the other person was grilling it, and the other person was taking it off so nothing touched the dusty ground. It was very fun. So moral of that story is it's easy enough that hopefully you can even take them and do them camping for a bit of fun. Okay, I'm gonna pull this one out and then we're gonna turn up the heat, not quite to full high, but I wanna turn that up a little bit so that we can get the vegetables sauteing. The key with the stir fry, and we are gonna do this in another Cook With Me, the key with the stir fry is we want the vegetables to cook on contact, not cook by steaming themselves. So we actually want the heat high, but we wanna make sure we're moving everything around really regularly. So just the surfaces are getting kind of really well heated and not fully left to sit there and get soft and totally cooked through. Okay, so I've turned the heat up a little bit. We're gonna put this one under here. Keep them nice and soft. And now we can put a little bit of oil in there. So because the pan's quite hot, we wanna use a high heat safe oil. Okay, so hopefully you've got a 3rd press coconut oil, or maybe you're using avocado oil, something like that. This is gonna be, okay, before we do this though, I just wanna say is that once we start frying, things go really quick. Okay, so you kind of have to have all the vegetables ready and have your oil ready, and we're gonna stand here and just watch it, and it's going to be a little bit sizzly off the start. Ready? Okay, oil in. Toss that around gently, carefully. Very hot, and it's got extra flour in there too, so be careful. And veggies in straight away. And we're moving it around. So that the surface of the veggies is cooking without a lot of steaming. There. So now that our vegetables have kind of cooled down the frying pan, we don't have to worry so much about the high heat levels. I'm still only on 7 though, 7 out of 10, or 7 out of 9, okay? And at this point, if we want to do a true stir fry, we do have to crank the heat to high. So now that everything's in there and we're in control, we can turn the heat right up, get this process happening faster. And what this actually does, the reason why stir fries are so incredibly delicious is because at that high heat, it sears in all of the sugars on the outside edges of the vegetable and doesn't fully overcook the inside of the vegetable. So you get almost 2 layers of flavor happening in each bite. And that's why most people absolutely love a stir fry, okay? So that's what we're trying to do here, is the higher heat as opposed to steaming them. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to do a plate up. We're going to let that just keep cooking a little bit. But this is how I like to do it. You might have a different way. If you've kept them under the tea towel, they should be nice and pliable. So look how nice and soft and wrappable that is. Okay, so we're going to take our wrap. Let's put a little bit of hummus. White bean hummus in this case. Along an edge. Let's wrap this way. So we're going to put it in a line. Oh, that's going to be a nice squishy wrap. Maybe that's too much. There we go. And then last but not least, a bit of seasoning. So definitely go generous with a bit of salt and pepper. And whatever other spices you want. I think I'm going to go a little bit fancy. We're going to go some garam masala and a little bit of curry powder. Yum. And a little extra drizzle of this for good measure. Done. All right, so that goes off. Keep in mind they're still going to keep cooking in the frying pan. So if they're really, you don't want them to go anymore, we got to take them out of the frying pan. Okay? But basically, we're going to take these, layer them into our wrap. Yum. If you happen to have any fresh greens, let's pop some of them in as well. A little bit of frizzy lettuce and parsley. Yum. And we'll wrap that one up. Tuck it in nice and tight. And there we have it. I will, but first of all, I'll say goodbye. And thank you so much for coming to cook with me. If you have any questions, anything else you'd like to discuss, please type it in, let us know. I really want to see the photos. I want to see who's rolling, who's wrapping, who's Luigi tossing. And hopefully, yes, would love to hear back from you. Thank you very much for coming to cook with me. See you next time.